Thank you for joining us. This is Health Your Own Way podcast, and I am your host, Moak. Welcome to another episode. Today, we'll be talking about the gut brain connections in mental health. I'm really excited to have this conversation because a lot of people don't know how related your gut is to your mental health. And my guest is Raewyn. I apologize if I butcher your name, but she's a beautiful woman. And, before we go further, anything you want to add before we move forward?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for helping me get this message out there because, I have been both a practitioner and a patient. So I feel like, and I feel like I wasn't served being a patient appropriately with the conventional system. Everyone was very keen to just sort of like write you a script and tell you off you go, or just, stay in therapy for decades. And that really wasn't very helpful. And everything that I've learned since then, like going on my own journey with anxiety and my family's journey, because it is something that was familial for me. Like I grew up with like my grandfather had generalized anxiety disorder. And that was what sort of brought me down this path. And then when I developed all my own stuff later on in my 30s, I had to figure out, well, I don't want to end up like him, dependent on medication for 20 years because I saw what it did to his brain eventually. He ended up having multiple strokes because long-term use of psychopharmaceuticals can result in atherosclerosis. So that means that the arteries in the brain, they start to shrink. They do anyway as you get older. They start to become tighter as you get older, but you don't want to exacerbate that by taking something that's going to help them. So, which is why we always talk about like, oh, you want to keep your arteries flexible and supple and have things like omega-3s. But for him, he had been on these meds for 20 years. His nephew was a doctor, so he just used to go to his nephew and get a script, and they just, I saw what that did, and I saw that, talking therapy was never an option. So I was like, okay, how do we make sure that people are supported and they understand, well, why do I have anxiety? Because there is a why, and each person's why will be different. And that's been my whole journey. Like, well, how do you uncover what's driving your anxiety? Is it situational? Are you surrounded by toxic people? Are you in a toxic job? Or is it something biochemical that's going on? And if it's biochemical, then we can work on that. Like that's something that can, or is it genetic? That's the other thing too. The genes, people are like, oh, I can't change my genes. But believe it or not, like your gene expression, it can be modified. There's this science called epigenetics, and it's so important for people to understand that genes are not your destiny. Just because you've got a gene for something does not mean you are destined to have it. In fact, like because of his dementia, I ended up studying psychology and then neuropsychology, because I was like, okay, well, what happens to the brain as we age and how do we prevent it from aging? Because there are ways to do that. And just because you've got dementia or Alzheimer's in your family or anxiety in your family doesn't mean that you have to end up with those things. So I set out on that journey in 2001. I moved to the UK from a very sunny place. Like I grew up on an island in the Caribbean, and I had 800 pounds in my pocket and lived on sofas and went to university and had 3 jobs and studied psychology to uncover this why and what are these different drivers and how are they all. They're modifiable at the end of the day. They're all modifiable. They're down to the things that we're doing every single day. Because if you think about the body as like a computer, like you put in the right commands, you're going to get the right results. But if you keep giving it the wrong commands, you keep giving your cells the wrong commands, you're going to be programmed for illness, right? So how do you program yourself for optimal health? How do you program yourself for your brain working well? And I've seen that when you get the body right, the brain will follow, and then the mind will follow. And, up until my own illness, and like I had a burnout episode in 2016. Now, up until that point, I had really been thinking that it was all about the mind and the body. And if you got the mind right, the body will follow. So I was all about like hypnosis and CBT and positive self-talk, and not understanding that if you're not nourishing yourself appropriately, and that's different for everyone as well. Like some people are going to do really well being a vegan, and some people are going to do really well being, on a carnivore type diet. So you have to figure out what works best for you, what works, and, your carb portions, your protein, all these things are really, really important in how you signal the cells in your body to function and how your brain functions, your neurochemistry. So your biochemistry will impact your neurochemistry, and the way to modulate your biochemistry, number one, through food. There are obviously other ways, but I think probably one of the easiest ways that you can get started is through food and through figuring out what works best for your body and your bio individuality. So that's kind of the origin story. I don't know if you have any questions, but I'm sure that there are probably quite a few questions that would have come out of that. But it has all been driven by, like, family stuff and seeing how devastating it was. Really devastating. Like, I hated seeing what happened to him, and then seeing it happen to my mother too. And her story did not end well either, unfortunately. He had multiple strokes, and he gradually declined over 7 years and was bedridden. So, and that was horrible. And same thing sort of happened to my mom. So it was very painful to watch, and I just been determined. I'm like, nobody else on my watch that's going to happen to. Like, that's just not going to happen. So as many people as I can, I want to wake them up to the fact that your health is in your hands, and you don't have to succumb to a diagnosis and be like, oh, I'm depressed for the rest of my life. Like, you may have depression, you may be experiencing a period of depression, you may be experiencing a moment of anxiety, but there are things that you can do that go far beyond what your conventional methods are, because they tend to really be quite narrow, unfortunately. It's really about like, well, what pill can you take? And you never say, well, how long am I going to be on this? Oh, you're just going to take it. Like, well, how long? You're just going to take it. That's not a solution. That's like, you've got a fire in your house, and all you're doing is turning off the fire alarm rather than looking for the fire.
Okay. You said a lot. And don't get me wrong. What you said, I kept up with you. I understood. I think for me personally, when I'm listening to you, I can tell you're very passionate about this. Like, you have some very deep personal experience to that. I think a lot of people are like, okay, so we heard your story. How does it relate to me? Mm-hmm. And I think the first step is, when we talked about the topic of gut-brain connection with mental health, you made points, but let's bring it back for them so they can keep up with both of us, right?
Yeah.
So
sure.
in a sense, like, when we talk about gut brain, a lot of people may not understand what is a gut brain, right? Let's start with that. What is a gut brain, and how does it relate to your mental health? Because you indicated at one point that, mental, like, your arteries in your head, like, people have certain type of dementia, stuff like that. So let's step back and start with, what is a gut brain?
Yeah. So the gut brain connection, essentially, and this is something that your therapist probably won't know, but some of them are waking up to it. Like, you got about 70 to 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. So most people would know what serotonin is. It's a neurotransmitter. So it's that happiness neurotransmitter.
Yes, the one you get where you eat sugar and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's a happiness neurotransmitter. Now, the thing is, like, it's produced in your gut. It's not actually produced in your brain. Like, you got almost 90% of it being produced in your gut. Now, you've got this highway going between the brain and the gut called the vagus nerve, and that's transporting your neurochemicals, right? So your food is converting into these things. Now, so your protein, your neurotransmitters and your neurochemicals are mostly made of protein. They're amino acids, right? And I've seen that people who tend to be vegan or vegetarian tend to struggle a lot with anxiety. And believe it or not, that was me. I was actually a vegetarian. And that's when things kind of crashed and burned for me, right? So I've seen that. If you're not getting the right balance of protein and you're not absorbing your food, so where do you get protein from? From food. So it goes into your stomach, it goes down into your gut, and then it's converted into these neurochemicals, into hormones. So you got neurotransmitters, you got hormones, and then it's transported back up to the brain. And then there's this whole, and of course, there's a bunch of other things that are going on, and there are lots of ways to help that process along. And like I said, the first way is through nutrition, right? Getting the right foods in order to be able to create these conversions and these, what you call like cell signaling. Okay. So you're signaling. So when you eat, what you're eating is signaling to your cells how they should behave. So if you're eating lots of sugar, unfortunately, that can be causing a lot of damage to the inside of the gut. So that's going to create and feed like bad bacteria. So we want to be feeding good bacteria because they keep bad bugs out. And when we've got, like, let's say, leakiness of the gut because we're consuming non-steroidal anti-inflammatory meds, the contraceptive pill, antibiotics, which was my story, lots of antibiotics, medications in general can be very damaging to the gut, as well as like toxic foods and foods that I call them Franken foods that they're not even in their real form. They're like, they come in a box, so they're highly processed. So these are the foods that can actually program your cells to not perform well, as well as the medications, as well as external stressors too, like stuff in your environment, like you might be drinking, water that's not filtered. It can be full of, chemicals, pesticides, heavy metals. So toxic foods, toxic people, toxic medications, these things can damage what's going on with your gut. So you're not going to absorb your food very well. And you're not going to have that conversion happening where you can be creating the right levels of your neurochemicals and even your hormones. So what we've seen is that, you know, people who are eating, let's say your standard Western diet, because I lived in England for 20 years, it's not very different to the US, except maybe the portion sizes are a lot bigger in the US. Like when you get to America and you get a plate, you go to dinner and it's like, oh my God, that could feed me for 3 days, you know? So that's probably the one, but there is a lot of the same sort of like eating for convenience. So everyone is eating on the go, highly caffeinated, and then wondering like, hey, I've had like 4 cups of coffee. Why do I have anxiety? Why can't I sleep? I'm like, maybe we might need to look at, you know, the way that you're living. So your lifestyle and the way that you're nourishing yourself is going to have a huge part to play on what's happening to your body and then how that subsequently impacts your brain. So it was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope that kind of makes it clear that, you know, what you put in is what you're going to get out ultimately.
No, it makes sense. And I think just to add on top of that, a lot of people, when they think of maybe not everybody, this is just it's a possibility that if you're depressed or you're suffering, right? A lot of people assume it's external factors that are being affected, right? They never look internally. They never look at, you know, what am I doing to my body that's affecting my mental state, right? Even though some people are dealing with stress, how are you nourishing yourself to be able to adapt or adjust to the stress level that's coming to your life? Like what kind of vitamins, minerals, or what kind of substance that are you giving your body to be able to fight up those stress factors that are coming in? You understand? So I get what you see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it's nice that I find that a lot of people don't hear what you're saying or are not experiencing or don't acknowledge what you're saying is the better choice of word, because we're so used to eating, you know, you just get those chips right away, you get all those stuff. And then you're just wondering, okay, if I had those vitamins that are meant to be able to give my body that extra boost to deal with some stress factors or deal with some pain I'm having, and I'm not giving it, then all that gut and all that pain and all that bacteria is eating my stomach, right? And then my mind is like, okay, we have nothing to help us fulfill what you want us to do, right?
Exactly. That's pretty much it. It's like you're running on empty, like you're not giving, like a car, like you say, I'm trying to drive this car, but I didn't put any gas in it, or I didn't fix the tires, you know, can't drive the car. And your body is the car. Your body is the vehicle that's going to take you to where you want to get to in life. And if you aren't giving it what it needs, if you're not putting in the right oil, you're not putting in the right kind of gas, you're not putting in premium versus, you know, you're gonna stall, you're shut down, right? So
let me add on top of that. Think of it like a lot of people spend money taking care of their car, making sure their house is beautiful, you know, buying that external stuff, but then they don't want to pay that extra $5 for that vegetable there that's going to feed them properly.
Right.
You know, they'll have like the pizza that's like $2, and I'm just like, long-term gain here, long-term gain here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that's unfortunately what I've seen so powerfully, like in my family. Like I saw what happened to my mother. You know, cancer is horrible. Like it's expensive. Every time you have to go for a scan, every time you have to go for chemo, you know, the $300,000 that she spent on dying, you know, she didn't live, she died, right? That you spend on tests and all the things that she could have invested it, and she just refused to eat right. Like we all tried so hard with her, and she just said it won't make a difference. And her doctors told her it won't make a difference. You know, like she had doctors telling her it doesn't matter, because I gave her like a nutrition plan when she first got diagnosed. I said, go show it to your doctor. I was like, these are the supplements I want you to be taking. And he didn't even look at it. She said he didn't even look at it. And I thought, oh, there's so little hope. Like and of course, like, you know, she was very depressed about the fact that her body was breaking down, but at the same time she wanted a pill. She's like, well, they won't just give me something to fix it. She's like, I'll have surgery, I'll do whatever. But she was not prepared to be like, okay, I'm gonna wake up and have vegetables. You know, it was like, oh, can I have like bread and cereal and, you know, all the things that feed, you know, these toxic bacteria that we don't want growing in our bodies. And the thing about the gut is that we are outnumbered 100 trillion to 1. So there's 100 trillion microorganisms living in your digestive tract that are not human. 100 trillion.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Could we just leave it? I don't need a mental state right now. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate you saying that, because a lot of people, just to go back, want the simplest thing to do. They want everything like fast. Give me a pill and fix everything.
Mhm.
And I think, when you mention about genetics and, changing what could be possibly for you in the future, it takes hard work. Like, we're not saying that this is going to be something simple. You're going to have to put effort in it. You're going to have to eat properly. You're going to have to do those extra things to prevent your genetics from fulfilling whatever destination they think that you should be in, right?
Mhm.
And I think, one of the questions I would ask is, what are some, because we talk about gut brain, right? What are some issues that you found personally that have prevented people from even just working on improving their gut brain? Like, have you, because based on you even mentioned like your mom, she didn't want to do it because she was told by her doctor that it's not
It
going
will
to change
make an
anything.
yeah. Yeah. And that's probably the number one issue. Like, people believe that their doctors have all the answers, but they have to understand that their doctors are trained in a system where they match a pill to a symptom. So you go to the doctor and when they say, how can I help you? And you tell them, oh, I have headaches, I have this, I have that. And yeah, right. You go, I'm like, my periods are weird, my skin's weird. So it's okay, your skin's weird, go see a dermatologist. And the dermatologist say, okay, your skin's weird, let's give you a cream, right? You say, I have a headache. They say, okay, go see a neurologist. And then the neurologist will give you a pill. And this is all personal stuff, by the way, right? Like, this is my story. So it's like, and you say, my hormones are weird, they're not performing. Okay, go see a gynecologist and an endocrinologist. And you go to these people and they say, well, we might we'll put you on some medications to regulate your cycle or to sort your hormones out. And nobody sits down and connects the dots. And it's all just, okay, it's very what we call a reductionist approach. It's just like we chase symptoms. You're like, and you're chasing symptoms. And by the time you're done seeing all these different ologists, you have got a suitcase full of medications to take, and you're not even 35. And that was me. And
Sorry to hear.
yeah, so that I'm kind of like, well, this is not sustainable. And of course, by that point, I had already studied psychology, and I knew that psychopharmaceuticals were very damaging to the brain long term, in addition to other pharmaceuticals being very damaging to the brain long term, even though they're technically meant to pick you up, take the edge off. That's what I remember my psychiatrist saying. She's like, oh, just take the citalopram, just take it. It will take the edge off. I'm like, but what about all the things in my life that aren't working? Can we talk about how to fix those? Like, can we figure that out? Can we work through it? Can we, and there wasn't really, so you don't necessarily get the support from your clinicians. And that's probably one of the biggest barriers. Or they're very happy, there's a conflict of interest there too. Like, in order for them to keep getting paid, you need to stay unwell. So there's also that. So you have to stay sick, and and I always tell people, I said, if I'm still seeing you after 6 months, then I have failed as a professional. I do not want to be seeing a client after 6 months. And in fact, when I trained as a hypnotherapist, we had 6 weeks. And I like, if you keep coming back after 6 weeks, then things have not worked out. Like, this is not, because I don't want anyone dependent on me.
I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
when you said that, I love that. I can relate, but go ahead. I'm going to let you finish.
Yeah, you don't want people dependent on you. I'm not a crutch. I'm here to teach you how to help yourself, how to help your body work, how to help for you to tune into it. So you start learning how to treat it. But if after, like I said, if 6 months we're still working on something, then something's wrong. And, I've seen people who've seen multiple therapists, multiple specialists, and they've been like, oh, well, I've been seeing this gastroenterologist since I was 16. I'm like, how old are you now? 35. Okay, that's like nearly 20 years of you seeing, and you've been taking that medication for 20 years. And now you're getting to that point where you're starting to build up into taking more medications because things are so out of whack. So when you start seeing someone or working with a professional, or let's say a medically trained professional, be mindful that their model is to keep you on medications, right? And that's what they have a license for. They have a license for dispensing medications. I don't have a license because I don't dispense medications, but I help people get well in 6 to 12 weeks.
Okay,
And they don't need to be on medications in order to do that. In fact, I help them get off of medications. And there's an old Chinese proverb. In fact, it's not a proverb. It's the way that in traditional Chinese medicine, they said, the mark of a good doctor is not how many medications they can get you on, it's how many they can get you off.
I like that.
Right? So how many can we get you off of? Because you don't have a Xanax deficiency. You don't have a Prozac deficiency. That's not why your body is needing those things. Something has happened, something's triggered, or maybe you have genetics that, for me, I went and I actually tested my genetics, and yes, I have genes for anxiety. I do. And I'm aware of that. I have genes for certain estrogenic cancers as well. So I've got to be mindful of those things and eat and live in accordance with, to make sure those things never actually happen. So that's how I started practicing hypnosis and meditation, and doing more mindful things, and being mindful about the way that I live, and again, not overthinking, but just being conscious. Like, okay, I know if I do this, it's going to elicit this response. So I will make a different choice. So it's all at the end of the day about choices.
I agree with you because everybody, as you mentioned, we're not all made the same. We all have our advantage and disadvantage. If you're
Mhm.
self-aware of the fact that you may be prone to be a little more obese, or prone to arthritis, or your family has certain type of genetic issue, it's your responsibility to make sure that you do something that prevents you from getting worse, or you can prevent that from happening. Now, I
Mhm.
know you mentioned that what you do specifically, like if anybody was interested in reaching out to you, learning more about what you offer, how you can help them, what is the best platform to reach out on?
Yeah, so I have a free course that I like people to go through before they start to work with me, because I think start with the freebie, see if you are willing, because I give you little exercises to do at the end of every day, so stuff to gradually change. And it's only 5 days. It's like a 5 day, it's called a
Okay.
reset. It's like a little reset. 5 day mini course, just 2-minute videos, not crazy, and a little workbook to go along with it. So I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to start, and I'd just love to encourage people to do that. And it's formulated around the way that I work. So I work across these 5 pillars. It's called diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. So, the idea is that we don't only focus on food, and we don't only focus on supplements, and we don't only focus on stress. We look at how everything in your life is joined up, and how we can actually how you can connect those dots and make them flow better in order for you to feel better. So these bricks in your house of health, that's essentially what they are. They're building blocks. And we're looking at, well, how do we build a strong foundation of health? Firstly, with the body, but also, like, the stress reduction piece is huge, because there are like 3 types of stressors. You've got your biochemical stressors, you've got your psychological and environmental stressors, so things that influence the way that you're feeling about the world, but also your perspective as well is also something that I work on, because I did train in CBT. So I try to get people to start seeing, like, okay, well, where are your thinking errors or your automatic negative thoughts? Where do they come in? And how can you recognize them and stop them? Because they can run out of control for sure. So it's very integrative, and there's a whole field dedicated to this called integrative medicine for mental health. There are conferences that happen every year that I attend. Sometimes they're in Chicago, sometimes they're in San Diego, which is where I spend half my time. Sometimes they're in New York. So there are lots of these types of conferences that are available for practitioners to go to, but also there are other things that are open to the public as well. So I feel like there are a lot of resources that if we could just signpost people to, there's so much that they can start getting tuned into. I also have a free Facebook group where I share a lot about this stuff, and I have experts come in and talk, and we also have little challenges, like monthly challenges that are free as well, just to kind of get you on track, get you to start thinking and shifting and think about things in a different way. So, and lots of resources shared in there, like papers that you can read, in addition, and blogs that I write. So stuff that can help just get you started. Like, if you're not prepared to be like, oh, I don't really need to start with doing lab work to figure out if my genetics are wonky, or I don't need to do lab work to see if my gut's out of whack. I'm not there yet, because I realize that might be a bit of a leap. Like, we're going to test my stool. Like, what? How does that help my gut health? But, if we look, usually what I see is that the balance of bacteria, we can see a lot of things that are influencing things like joint pain, headaches, skin, as well as mood and energy levels. So, start with the free course, start with the free Facebook group, and we can take it from there. And then you can see, like, am I ready to commit to some of these things? Do they make sense to me? Do I start feeling better the minute I start changing my food? And 9 out of 10 times, or 10 out of 10 times, you start to see that people start to feel better once they start to change their food.
I appreciate that. I think you forgot to mention, is it on your website or how would they get that freebie?
So Facebook, like, will
Okay.
we put it in the show notes?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we'll
will.
put it in the show notes. So it's just facebook.com/groups/well works world. So the idea is that we're creating a well world and that we have all these people on this mission to all be healthy and vibrant and happy. So that, yeah, you can find it on Facebook, and also the freebie is on, and we'll put this in the show notes too. It's on my website on well-works.co.
I appreciate you saying that. I know that you created your company. I'm going to assume that you created your company based on your personal experience and stuff like that. I before we let you go, for a lot of people that are watching, listening to, what do you think they need to know to understand that they need to make a change to make a difference in their life?
That is such a powerful question. Let me think on it. What do you need to know? Well, currently, if you're listening to this and you are struggling and you've been struggling for years, let's say, then clearly what you've been doing hasn't been working, right? So you can't DIY your health the same way you can't DIY your car. Like, you would not, if your car broke down, you don't try and fix it yourself, hopefully. Hopefully you take it to a professional. I tried that once. I went on YouTube to fix something in my car. I did try it, but it was a disaster. So, and I remember I said, you know what? I can't do this. I'm not a mechanic. Like, I can't figure out what's going on with this. And it's the same thing. You are not a body expert. You're not a biochemical expert. Go to someone who's lived through it as well and who's been through the experience. So, someone like myself, the doctor that I work with a medical doctor and 4 nutritional therapists. And we've all had experiences of these things happening to us, either our own personal breakdowns before our breakthroughs and changing careers. Everybody has changed careers. So we've all kind of come from one place and now have ended up in another where we want to help people because we're tired of seeing people struggle and be dismissed by their professionals, by the people who are supposed to help them, that they've been paying to help them, but are not necessarily getting them to where they want to get to. So that's the whole ethos behind this. And like, I've only worked with people who've had a personal experience. I haven't really worked with anybody who hasn't. Everybody else that comes into the practice, who works with me and supports the work that we're doing, they've all either had, I call it a come to Jesus moment. They've had like that, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, this is not working. My life is flatlining. I don't have any energy. I'm depressed. So they now are motivated to impact other people's lives in a positive way. And that's everything to me. Like, I can't do anything else. Someone said, don't you just want to go get a job and make it easy? I'm like, no, like, I really, really love when someone says, hey, it's only been like 7 days and I've lost like 10 pounds because I've changed how I'm eating and I don't have pain anymore and my anxiety is starting to go away. I'm kind of like, yes, this is why I do. I was like, it can happen so quickly. It can happen fast. Really, really fast.
No, because I can tell that you love what you do. A lot of people have a hard time finding what they do and what they enjoy. And I appreciate you saying this. I really appreciate you having this conversation because I feel that a lot of us are suffering physically and mentally, and a lot of us are not realizing that what we feed ourselves is affecting the way we feel. So thank you for this conversation. And I wish you all the best in your journey. I think you are going to make a huge impact into the world. And you can tell anybody who's watching or even listening is that, she's just coming from experience and coming from heartache and from family. So she wants to help out is what I'm getting from you.
And from love, like, ultimately, like, I love the people that I work with. I love watching them become happy. Like, I just love them, and I love on them too. And they get a lot of love when they start to work. Yeah, I do. They do get a lot of love when we start. And they're sometimes a little bit like, oh my God, like, my husband hasn't been listening to me for years, but you listen to everything. And sometimes it can be a little bit like, they start messaging me all the time because like, nobody believed me before. And, but yeah, I do love on my clients, just giving them a lot of love and holding a safe space for them to transform.
Appreciate that. I like that comment, holding a safe space to transform. Thank you very much for having this conversation with me.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing and for helping me bring this message out to more people. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're glad to have you join us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, share with anyone that needs to be empowered and inspired, and don't forget to join us next week for the next episode of Health Your Own Way podcast. Have a good day, you guys.